Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
above replacement radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball, kind of whatever. I'm your host, Chris Chianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. We are less than 2 weeks out now from opening day. By the way, this is episode 299 as we're recording this. So we have a very exciting draft coming up in the next week for episode 300. But I want to talk to you today because you got one of the most unique and special things going around right now this weekend. You got the Chase Burns experience. So I want to hear what that looked like up close and in person.
Yeah, I mean, for those unaware, I'm in the Charlottesville area, right of about a 15-minute drive away, in traffic included, from the UVA athletic complex. And caught two UVA baseball games against Wake Forest. Wake Forest has Chase Burns, and he started on Saturday. And yeah, I think in the most recent mock draft that I read, he was the number 5 pick. And yeah, I mean, living 97 to 99 with his fastball, pretty tremendous slider. I don't recall what the rest of his repertoire was, but it didn't really seem to matter as he threw 7 innings with 1 run allowed, 2 hits, 2 walks, and 13 strikeouts. And it was pretty stellar. No doubt about it.
Yeah, he's the number 1 pitcher most likely going in this upcoming draft in 2024. Was he still throwing 99 in the 7th inning?
He did hit 99. I think it was like with 2 outs and he was just giving it his all. But he did hit 99 in that like second to last at bat, which was crazy. But he was still like, even at his most tired, he was still 96, 97.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, as a starter. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yes, I'm sure that looked like a lot of fun in person.
Yeah, it was fun. I wish I bought tickets sooner to get closer. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty phenomenal. And yeah, I mean, like, that's someone who could be like Spencer Strider coming up, like a next level like Spencer Strider if he's living 97 to 99, because that's what Strider does. But yeah, fun weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia over here. But yeah, we have some MLB to get to. And speaking of guys who strikes a lot of guys out, Dylan Cease of the Chicago White Sox, or formerly of the White Sox, I should say, was traded over to the San Diego Padres for Drew Thorpe, and I forget who the other prospect was involved.
Someone possibly related to Sebi Zavala, but I don't think he actually was.
Yeah.
Was one of them. I think it was 3 prospects in this package for Dylan Cease.
Yeah, and Drew Thorpe was one of the more notable prospects in the Juan Soto trade. So they flipped Drew Thorpe for Dylan Cease. Padres get a quality piece to their rotation. White Sox, continued their rebuilding. Any thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this deal. For one, like, how can you not love AJ Preller? Like, you can sit here and talk about if he's a good or bad GM, but the fact that he traded away an entire farm system's worth of players over the last few years to build the current Padres roster, trading for guys like Juan Soto, trading for guys, unfortunately, like Austin Nola, trading for guys that are on this team currently, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell when he was on the team, Josh Hader. Like, he traded a litany of prospects to get all these guys, and he still had the prospect capital to trade for Dylan Cease while also keeping Jackson Merrill and Ethan Salas. Like, the Padres just never really run out of prospects. It's pretty crazy how they're able to do this. And yeah, again, 2 of their their 2 top prospects still in the system. Ethan Salas, the 17-year-old catching phenom, Jackson Merrill, a shortstop that is going to be playing center field. The Padres are known for two things: prospects and guys play shortstop that are not playing shortstop.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so Dylan Cease, if I recall correctly, has 2 years left to control left.
Hmm.
Yeah, 2 years left to control. So, not necessarily a full rental. But he's obviously known for his 2022 season in which he was uh ranked second in the AL Cy Young. Had a bit of a down year, but peripherally it wasn't that that bad of a year necessarily, or that bad of a step back. He continued to strike a good amount of players out. Just luck just didn't seem to go as on his side as it did in 2022. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool, at least from a Padres perspective, of like they're not necessarily giving up right now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean they're still trying to be competitive, which I respect, in a year where you have to cut budget because the Padres are in this very bizarre financial situation where they had to take a loan from the city to pay last year's payroll because they went over budget. Their owner very suddenly passed away, unfortunately. They had to cut payroll this year. They obviously did that by losing Juan Soto, by losing Blake Snell, losing Josh Hader, and they're still making an effort to be competitive. And I think the Cease trade really makes sense because that is maybe the best starting pitcher that was on the trade market that was within some sort of reason to get. Corbin Burns is less team control and maybe is going to cost more. Dylan Cease made a lot of sense for this team, and he's probably their number one starter now, right? Like, would you put him above Darvish and Musgrove?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, certainly, like he's definitely has the highest ceiling among those two, I would say. Musgrove has been pretty good. Darvish has had his moments, like, he's been kind of up and down, at least in terms of run prevention. But if I had to build up my rotation right now, I think I would have Cease at the top of it. Although
Mhm.
I know organizations I think don't typically like run a guy that's new to the organization as their opening day starter. Typically, I don't think. Um,
Mhm.
except unless you like, I know the Red Sox with David Price, they did that, but there was really no other option. But um, and like with when they got Chris Sale, they didn't even throw him out opening day because Porcello won Cy Young the year before. But shout out to that legendary season. But yeah, regarding Cease, yeah, he's probably the best guy in the rotation. And given his stuff and his ability to strike guys out, I think there's some good things that can come out of this. And I think the industry knows that last year was a bit of a fluke in terms of, how many runs he was giving up last year.
I'm very interested to see what the Padres choose to do with him from a Arsenal standpoint. In 2022, the year he finished runner-up in American League Cy Young voting, he used his slider as his primary pitch, and it was absolutely dominant. I think hitters hit 128 against it that year. They had him use the fastball a little bit more in 2023. It wasn't like a crazy change in Arsenal. He still threw his slider 38% of the time compared to 42% the year prior. But I mean, his slider had a 36 run value in 2022. But opponents hit 128 with a 143 expected batting average, slug 209 with a 223 expected slugging. Yeah, it was one of the best pitches in all of baseball. I'm curious to see if the Padres are going to let him use it as his primary pitch again, maybe expand on it even more. And I'm curious to see if there's other changes they make. He'll definitely have a much better defense behind him in San Diego than he did in Chicago, which is encouraging. And also, he'll probably be in a more favorable ballpark. So I feel like with this trade, there is a much better chance of us seeing some closer version of 2022 Dylan Cease to before the trade.
Right. Yeah. If I'm a Padres fan, like I think what I would be most concerned about is how hard the hitters are hitting the ball against him. His average exit velocity against went from 86.8 miles per hour to 90.0 miles per hour. And then looking at his years before 2022, it was a lot closer to 90 than it was to his career low in 2022 of 86.8. So that's something that I would be paying attention the most because it seems like no matter what excluding like 2020, he's gonna strike guys out. He'll walk guys at a less than ideal rate, but the strikeouts will make up for it. So you also know you're not going to get a ton of innings out of him, unfortunately. It's usually under 6 innings per start, usually closer to 5 than it is 6. But nonetheless, like, he's I think you can rely upon him for some quality innings. And yeah, I think maybe some questions will be answered about him this season, but a 28-year-old right-handed pitcher who makes a ton of starts and strikes out uh, very well north of 25% of his batters, that's something you're gonna be pretty cheerful about, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean the meme here is the Padres replaced Blake Snell with right-handed Blake Snell. Right.
Yes.
I mean, like innings pitched wise, they were within I think like 3 innings of each other, in roughly the same number of starts, similar K per nine, similar walk rates. Both of them had walk rates over 10%. I mean, yeah, obviously Cease needs to have better batted ball metrics to be successful. Um, but he had it in the past, right? I mean, maybe 2022 Cease did look a lot like 2023 Blake Snell for sure.
Yeah, no
Right.
doubt
The
about
only
it.
the only difference is that 2023 or 2022 Cease was in the same league as 175 ERA Justin Verlander.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And something I said earlier is like credit to the Padres for still trying, because like, yeah, I think it's easy to on the surface get um kind of ill-hearted about this team, considering like on the surface, yeah, 82-80 season last year, and they just lost they're losing their best, or arguably two of their best player, or arguably their two best players, but probably, two of their top, 4 or 5 players, definitely in Juan Soto and Blake Snell. But in saying that, they did have a Pythagorean win loss of 92-70 last year, because they just happened to lose a ton of one-run games. And I don't really excuse that for that season, but I think in terms of the next season, it can say a lot um, about what you can do. I think like we saw that with like the Rangers this year, like they significantly underperformed their Pythagorean win loss last year, and then they won a ton more games this year. They were 9-23 in one-run games last year, famously or infamously 2-12 in extra inning games. So like, they were scoring the runs and they were preventing the runs at a good rate. It's just they didn't time them out correctly. So I think that's easier to fix than if they weren't scoring the runs or weren't preventing the runs. So yeah, I think there's they're kind of a sleeper team, not something that we would have thought we would be saying about the Padres at this time last year, but they're a bit of a sleeper team, especially now with Dylan Cease sort of completing that rotation.
Yeah, I mean they are definitely keeping themselves competitive. Obviously you look at that division and it looks pretty clear that the Dodgers are running away with it. But beyond that, like I know I don't love talking about run differential, but the Padres had a run differential I think above 100 plus 100 last year. The Diamondbacks had a negative run differential last year. So who knows what could happen in that division? The Giants could always be a sneaky team. We know what the Rockies are going to be probably, ideally. Um, but yeah, there is a lot of nuance in the middle of the order, sort of there in that NL West. And yeah, the Padres are very much keeping themselves in it, despite the losses that they have. Because not only are they losing those big three, but they're losing Michael Wacha, they're losing Nick Martinez, they're losing Seth Lugo. Like they are losing a lot of pitchers from last year. But I mean, you look at this rotation and. Barring any injury, this looks like a 5-man rotation. Darvish, Musgrove, Cease, Michael King, and then Johnny Brito, Matt Waldron, whatever they want to go with. Like that's a 5-man rotation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, definitely don't sleep on the main piece that they got for Juan Soto. Obviously, you're going to miss Juan Soto, but Michael King, he showed he was elite down the line, albeit a very, very small sample size of 8 starts, but showed those flashes nonetheless. So yeah, there's some, I think the Cease trade is a bit of a reminder of that hopefulness over there in San Diego,
Mhm.
despite that, horribly disappointing year last year. Anything more on the Dylan Cease trade?
I think that's kind of everything. I mean, I guess from the White Sox perspective, this seemed like an obvious move even before this trade was made, right? I mean, there's two years left of team control for Dylan Cease. There's really no reason to believe the White Sox are going to be competitive in the next 2 years. I mean, the farm system looks interesting, but there is so much, malfunction on the major league roster right now that just needs to be figured out. And and they got a very good prospect capital for Cease. I think Drew Thorpe was minor league pitcher of the year last year, like I mentioned with the Soto trade. Like that's a big piece. That they're getting back. The rotation looks shaky at best, probably worse than that. I mean, they just announced that Michael Kopech is going to be going to the bullpen, so that's another starter that's I wouldn't say down because it's their own decision, but I mean there are a lot of question marks in that rotation right now. Eric Fetty is the starting pitcher one listed on Fangraphs right now, so that yeah, yeah, that Eric Fetty.
Yeah, he should be in our draft for next episode.
Yeah.
Um, he's
Yeah,
gonna
I mean,
be,
who's going to start opening day for the White Sox now?
yeah,
Because the Fangraphs projected rotation is Eric Fetty, Mike Soroka, Chris Flexen, Garrett Crochet, and Nick Nastrini.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's crazy.
who who is gonna start on March 28th? Have they made an announcement for that? Probably not, right? I know some teams have at this point. Yeah, the White Sox have not. It might be Eric Fetty.
We have come a long way. We have come
Yeah.
a long way on the South Side. We were like
How what were we saying about this team 2 years ago coming into this season?
like we thought 2021 was like their primer. Like, oh, it's like you got all these guys coming. You got Lance Lynn at the top of the rotation. He's going to dominate. Lucas Giolito, like we still haven't seen his full
I think Lucas
potential.
Giolito was my 2022 AL Cy Young pick.
Dylan Cease was.
Lucas Giolito was 2021 then.
Right,
You're right.
right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
Dylan, but still, we were talking about a Cy Young winner in the rotation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like we were like, okay, wait for, Michael Kopech's, performance.
Development, yeah.
He's gonna come into his own at some point. Like, and yeah, now we're talking about Eric Fetty. That's
Starting on
crazy.
opening day,
Yeah.
who we haven't seen pitch in the major leagues since the year, what, like 2018,
Um,
2019?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh
Yeah,
no, 2022. What am I talking about?
yeah, it sucks and
He spent 1 year in the KBO, did awesome there for what it's worth, and I think he developed a new splitter while he was there. Um, so that's cool.
that's cool. But yeah, it does suck that they hired their director of player development as their GM. And they hired
Yeah,
internally when they were failing massively. But
yeah.
yeah,
I
we'll
don't know.
see.
It seems
Yeah,
it seems weird to me when you are firing multiple long-time executives at the same time and then hiring from within. It's like, wait, what are we like doing? Because like when you're moving on from guys like Ken Williams, who had been there, was one of the longest tenured executives in the entire league. Guys like Rick Hahn, who you know built built this team through an entire rebuild in the mid 2010s, and you're letting go of both of them at the same time. Like that screams to me like, okay, big organizational overhaul, and then you bring in a guy that was a part of that regime. That doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, it's a silly goose move, but we went over
I
it.
mean, the White Sox have been full of them over the last half decade.
Yeah, it's the loyalty to a fault of Jerry Reinsdorf. It's all that
Hmm.
stuff and just not, you know, no willingness to really move on. I think that was exemplified
Yeah.
in the Tony La Russa hiring back in 2021. But yeah,
To
shout out
be
to the
honest, I
White
don't even really
Sox.
hate. To be honest, I don't even really hate the move of moving Michael Kopech to the bullpen. I think it makes sense if he's just not going to develop as a starter. I think there's a lot of potential there. But oh man, that rotation.
Yeah, it's quite
Yeah.
something.
Oof.
Yeah, hopefully for Amy Crawford's sake, this ship gets righted within the
Yeah.
next couple
Not
of
to
years.
mention, not to mention their bottom three in the lineup. projected on Fangraphs is Paul DeYoung, Nicky Lopez, and Martin Maldonado.
Yeah, I mean it is quite like part of some of their lineup is like, oh yeah, in 2017 this would work. I think they grabbed Mike Moustakas off the free agent market as well.
Oh yeah, they did. I think yeah, but they think they had I think they signed to a minor league deal.
Ah, really?
I think so. Yeah, he's listed as the AAA first baseman right now,
All right.
or
Well,
third baseman rather.
hopefully he earns his way up the ladder. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have Moncada at third, so that's one of the very few positions of the diamond that's actually blocked.
oh wow. Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully the White Sox, they can get it together at some point. But until then, um, yeah, at least the Padres got a good, decent pitcher. Are we ready to move on to our final division preview slash breakdown?
Let's do it.
Yeah, we got the AL East this week. And we start off with our favorite team, who we aren't really that excited to watch this year, but at least they have a Netflix show about them, so we can kind of watch the disaster unfold in front of us. What I'm hoping is all of our negative comments about the Red Sox are used in a
Are
World
used
Series
as the beginning of the documentary.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the documentary. Yeah,
It'd be very
that's
funny if they showed it. It's like they were right.
oh yeah.
They nailed it. Dan Shaughnessy wrote this column. This might be the worst Red Sox team I've ever seen, and he nailed it.
Yeah. Like
Last
wow.
time we made a documentary about the Red Sox, we talked about Dan Shaughnessy saying it's over, and we proved him wrong. This time, he's getting his redemption.
Well, why we are talking as negatively about the Red Sox as we are is they went 78 and 84 last year, finished last in the AL East for the second consecutive season. In terms of subtractions, they lost Justin Turner, Chris Sale, Alex Verdugo, James Paxton, Adam Duvall, Corey Kluber, John Schreiber, and Luis Arias, and they added Tyler O'Neill, Vaughn Grissom, and Greg Weiser, and that's about it. They did add Lucas Giolito, but he will not be really playing a factor in 2024 at all because he injured his elbow. But yeah, who is so yeah, why we are not optimistic about them is those lack of subtractions because outside of O'Neill, Tyler O'Neill, Vaughn Grissom, and Greg Weiser, there really isn't much. There wasn't really added anything to the 2024 roster. Who's your Red Sox player to watch?
My Red Sox player to watch is actually like it comes from the one thing that I am very interested in looking at this year, and that's the Bailey Lab, right? Andrew Bailey coming in as the pitching coach, Craig Breslow coming in for his first season, a former pitcher and a guy that was very successful in Chicago, building some sort of pitching development there. And I think one of the most interesting projects there is Cutter Crawford. I mean, Chris and I cannot avoid seeing this guy pitch. And honestly, I think my note should just be if we don't ever go to one of his starts, he might win Cy Young because I'm pretty sure his ERA in the starts that we've watched him in is like 7.29 or something like that. It is so bad. Uh, but in 129 innings pitched last year, he had a 3.83 FIP and a 3.25 expected ERA. His 14% pop-up rate was the highest among the 199 pitchers with at least 200 batted balls allowed, and he had 351. It was also the eighth highest pop-up that anyone has had in any individual season since 2015 with at least 300 batted balls allowed, and again 351. And that's among the 1,082 pitchers to have done that since 2015 in any season. He had a 31.1% fly ball rate last year, which isn't great, but only 28.6% of his fly balls were pulled, which is definitely great at Fenway, assuming you're mostly facing righties. He also had a 82nd percentile chase rate. He had a 75th percentile walk rate, a 76th percentile hard hit rate. Opponents hit 164 against his four-seam fastball with a 177 expected batting average, and they slugged 327 with a 327 expected slugging. I mean, the projection models nailed it there. 21.1% of his batted balls last year were 40 degrees or higher and below the hard hit threshold. That was the third highest rate among the 124 pitchers with at least 300 batted balls allowed. And looking into his secondary pitches, his splitter, slider, and sweeper combined to produce a 177 batting average against, with a 323 slugging percentage against, and similar expected metrics in 127 plate appearances. So I think there is something of interest there with Cutter Crawford, and I'm very interested to see what the Bailey Lab can do to him.
Yeah, Cutter Crawford. Yeah, my player to watch is also Cutter
I
Crawford.
kind of figured we would be doubling up there,
Yeah,
but
obviously.
it's interesting. You can't not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my notes on him. Yeah, 4.04 ERA, but don't get fooled by that. He had a 3.25 expected ERA and 129 at third innings pitched. And I'm going to mention expected WOBA, and that's because expected WOBA is a 100% correlation with expected ERA. Expected ERA is determined by the expected WOBA, which is, a combination of like valuing walks, doubles, triples, singles to, their own run value. But out of 100 pitchers to throw 2,000 plus pitches last year, Cutter Crawford had the fourth lowest expected batting average against and fifth lowest expected WOBA against, along with the 10th lowest expected slugging against. So top 10% in all the major expected categories. That's what I love to see. Like, I'm not pumped on this Red Sox rotation, but I think I have a decent amount of faith in Cutter Crawford if he can, have similar, underlying results that he had last year. Part of that difference in ERA and expected ERA were two specific instances where a catchable fly ball got misplayed or lost in the roof and were counted as hits. I may include video on this, but I may not either, depending on the effort I plan to put forth. But they were like, those fly balls that should be caught but aren't caught. But since they weren't touched anybody, like they can't count as errors. If they were counted as errors, that would be 6 less earned runs allowed, and he would have had a 3.62 ERA instead of a 4.04 ERA. So that's a major difference. That's a major factor in why his ERA was over 4, and why I have a lot of faith in him heading into this year. Also, Cutter Crawford had a 19% strikeout minus walk rate, which was 5 percentage points above league average. His line drive rate was only 19%, and out of 124 pitchers with 300 plus batted balls against last season, his line drive rate was second lowest. You mentioned that pop-up rate. Yeah, 14% pop-up rate, led all 124 pitchers with 300 plus batted balls last year. Pretty phenomenal. And why he got many of those pop-ups was his four-seam fastball that you mentioned. Batters were under it because he had a high spin rate on that four-seam fastball, a higher spin rate than you would expect based on his velocity. But out of 82 pitchers with 750 plus four-seamers thrown, Cutter Crawford's spin rate on it was 7th highest, and his average vertical movement ranked 2nd out of 82, which means, the ball's not necessarily rising, but gravity has less of an effect on it, which makes it seem like it's rising. You expect the ball to drop a little bit, but these hitters are getting under it because it doesn't drop as much as they expect it to. Along with that, yeah, a 164 average and 327 slugging against his fastball. And out of those 82 pitchers to throw 750 plus four seamers, his average against his four seamer was the lowest, and his slugging against it was 4th lowest. So yeah, Cutter Crawford, I hope to see similar stuff this upcoming year. He's only had 1 year that, of this quality. He didn't really look that good in 2022. So I hope this is a trend from Mr. Crawford. But without further ado, let's get into some Red Sox questions.
Yeah, this is a question that I specifically tailored to you because I know that you're very passionate about one of these two things. Which number will be higher, Rafael Devers' hard hit rate or Masataka Yoshida's ground ball rate?
Ha, 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 ha. It's going to be tough to top Yoshida's ground ball rate unless he fixes it, of course. But
Hmm.
if I have to imagine Yoshida's ground ball rate was in the mid 50s. It wasn't quite, Logan Webb levels, but I think it was up there. And then Devers' hard hit rate would probably be in the low 50s, right? Or maybe
Hmm.
even high 40s.
I think it was like mid 50s actually.
Oh, mid. I'll take I'll take Devers' hard hit rate because I expect that to stay
Yeah.
consistent. And with Yoshida, I have to imagine that getting adjusted to that second year in the league will help him out a little bit.
Huh.
Wait, what's the
Um, I did not look at the numbers before writing this question. Devers' hard hit rate was 55.1%, and Yoshida's ground ball rate was 55.0%.
oh, okay. That's
Point 1% off.
okay. So
What a question.
I'll say yeah, I'll say Devers because yeah, I mean one of the things I pointed about why I thought Yoshida would win Rookie of the Year was in that World Baseball Classic, he actually had a 47% sweet spot rate. So I think he
Mhm.
has that ability. He just, like I think he just had a tough time getting adjusted to the MLB, and I expect that ground ball rate to lower a little bit, while Devers' hard hit rate will, I imagine, stay about the same. So yeah, now in my question, it revolves around one of those players. Last year, Tristan Cassis and Rafael Devers had the same rounded barrel rate of 13%. Who will have the higher rate this year?
Oh, that is tough. I mean, you look at Casas and you might immediately think him because he struggled out of the gate and was one of the best hitters in baseball from mid-June to the end of the season. Devers has always been the more consistent guy. You know what? I'll take the full season of Casas. I anticipate he's going to, have less like long-term struggles this year, and that he's going to be able to put it all together a lot more. He gets a chance to become probably like a top 10, maybe top 5 offensive first baseman in the game if he does it correctly this season. So I'm gonna go with him.
Yeah, yeah, he'll be good to watch for hopefully a full good season. Um,
Hmm.
Also with that, maybe this takes away from Cassis a little bit, but with barrel rate, like strikeout rate isn't it doesn't factor into that, and
Yep. Yeah,
Devers
I
will
mean,
strike
if
out
we're talking,
less.
I was to say if you asked barrels per PA, I would have said Devers like without even thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So that does it for the Red Sox. I will mention one honorable mention. I think if one of us knew that the other was going with Crawford, we would have picked this guy as a player to watch, Wilyer Abreu.
Yep, that was
Um,
my backup as well.
he had yeah, he had some really cool really cool things last year. Just even on the surface, he hit 316 with an 862 OPS, albeit 85 plate appearances, of course. That's a small sample size, but that sticks out. And then the process results were also really good. He had a average exit velocity of over 91 miles per hour, hard hit rate around 50%, above average barrel rate, above average sweet spot rate. And all his expected numbers were, if they were over, a qualifying time, they'd probably be, except for, yeah, they'd all probably be like 65th percentile or higher. And also his walk rate was 11%. So yeah, that's someone who we both personally are looking at, and we're very interested in based off of the small sample size that he had last year. Moving on to the Yankees, who, yeah, funny to talk about the Red Sox back to back, Red Sox and Yankees back to back as
To start, yeah.
to start a division, but that's what we're going with. The Yankees went 83 and 79, finished fourth in the AL East. They lost Michael King, Wandy Peralta, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, Luis Severino, Domingo Herman, Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, Kyle Higashioka, Greg Weiser, Kenyon Middleton, and Luke Weaver, but they did add some significant pieces as well, most notably Juan Soto, along with Trent Grisham, Alex Verdugo, Marcus Stroman, Caleb Ferguson, and Victor Gonzalez. And I will be talking about that last addition, Victor Gonzalez,
You
who
love Victor Gonzalez.
this is my second time talking about
You
Victor
love
Gonzalez.
Victor Gonzalez. Oh my goodness.
3 years apart. And the reason why he doesn't get recognition is because he can't really stay on the field, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about some fun things about Victor Gonzalez, who has been on the Dodgers since 2020. He was my 2021 Dodgers player to watch. Wasn't a hit, wasn't a flop. It's just he's just been kind of there, but he's been pretty good all throughout. And why I want to talk about Victor Gonzalez is he has a career 3.22 ERA, 3.35 FIP, and 1.35 ERA plus in 89 and a third innings pitched. He's a left-handed pitcher, I think mid 20s. I didn't get the exact age, but left-handed pitcher in his mid 20s. He was traded to the Yankees this past offseason. He has a career average exit velocity against of 84.9 miles per hour, a ground ball rate of 58% and sweet spot rate of 29.5%. Out of 615 pitchers with 200 plus batted balls since the start of 2020, his average exit velocity ranks 7th, which is about top 1%, and his ground ball rate against ranks 24th, which is top 4%. So he's allowing very soft contact and largely ground balls, which is a really, really good sign. Along with that, 36% of his batted balls against have been ground balls with exit velocities of 90 miles per hour or lower. And that is the 4th highest rate out of 615. Again, top 1% at allowing basically soft ground balls. And hitters have slugged 161 on those batted balls. And not only does he get a lot of ground balls, but he has an above average strikeout rate and a fairly average walk rate. I think his strikeout minus walk rate is 15%. So it's not just him. It's not that he gets a bunch of ground balls, but he has a 15% strikeout rate. No, he actually does have good strikeout and walk numbers to go with the soft contact and the ground balls. So yeah, I mean, Victor Gonzalez, underrated guy out of the pen. Hasn't really thrown, I don't think, anything more than like 40 innings in a year, but that could change. But they didn't trade him for his health. They traded him because he has a career ERA plus of 135. Who is your Yankees player to watch?
Yeah, I'm also going with a reliever, maybe one that is less heard of, and a very similar archetype of pitcher. I'm going with Ian Hamilton, who has pitched parts of a few seasons, but got the majority of his workload in 2023. In 58 innings pitched last year, Ian Hamilton produced an 86 mile per hour average exit velocity, a 34.4% whiff rate, and a 56% ground ball rate. So right there off the bat, ground balls, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of whiffs, and low and soft contact. That is pretty much everything you need for a dominant pitcher. The walks aren't great, and that's the case for a lot of people, but it's something that he could get better at, but he does all those things extremely well. He used his slider as his primary pitch last year, and it dominated. In 139 plate appearances, opponents hit 156 and slugged 234 against his slider with a 179 expected batting average and a 269 expected slugging. It had a whiff rate of 42.5%, a strikeout rate of 39.6%, and overall it gave him a 2.5 run value per 100. That means for every 100 sliders he threw, based on the results of them, he was saving about 2.5 runs, which was tied for 5th among the 109 pitchers with at least 100 plate appearances ending on sliders. So he had one of the best sliders in the league last year. He also had a zone contact rate of 73.7%, with the league average being 82, and a chase contact rate of 49.1%, with the league average being 58%. So Ian Hamilton is another interesting guy that could be coming out of the pen for the Yankees, a pen that definitely prioritizes ground ball pitchers. When you look at Victor Gonzalez, Ian Hamilton, Clay Holmes specifically, there are some interesting pieces, on this team of otherwise, big names in a big market.
Yeah. Ian Hamilton was the first Yankees. How about that from last year? He had a very interesting run of like a 9% line drive rate. I do recall that statistic. It was like 20 innings where he had a 9% line drive rate. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, now on to questions. My question regards a guy that's taken up a lot of their payroll right now, but could have the potential to bounce back. Will Carlos Rodon have over under a 99.5 ERA plus this year?
99.5. So he just has to be a league average pitcher, which even then I think would be still a disappointment. Right? I mean, if he puts up a 105, like, you got to remember they gave him a $162 million contract over 6 years. Yeah, last year he was very banged up, which he has been for, unfortunately, a lot of his career. That was certainly part of the risk, even though he had 2 healthy seasons, or 1.5 healthy seasons going into his free agency. I will take the over because I feel implored that I have to, right? I mean, 100 seems like a low bar to, even if he gets to 101, you're still looking at that and being like, is that what the Yankees signed for that much money? I don't think so. So yeah, I would have to take the over on that for sure. another, speaking of big names and big markets, like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be, I think, a very make or break season for Giancarlo Stanton, right? I mean, he has a 100 OPS plus over the last two seasons. He had a 695 OPS last year. His average exit velocity shrunk from 95 miles per hour in 2022 to 93.3 miles per hour in 2023. Will Giancarlo Stanton have a average exit velocity over or under 92 and a half miles an hour?
It's a good question. Um, I'll take I mean, yeah, it's a good question, but I'll take the over just because like I don't know, like I feel like no matter what, no matter how Giancarlo Stanton is doing, we always know he's gonna have like those crazy 120 mile per hour batted
Mm-hmm.
balls, which isn't everything. That's one batted ball to vary the averages, but it's not. There's a reason why they measure max exit velocity compared to average exit velocity because like sometimes the guys that can hit it the hardest don't end up hitting it the hardest on average. But nonetheless, I still think he does it because also with him striking out as much as he does, that gives him less opportunities to hit soft hit batted balls, and I feel like when he does hit it, he typically will hit it hard. But yeah, I'll say he hits the over there. Um, but uh, but who knows? I mean, yeah, that's another guy eating up a lot of space there. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, but yeah, now on to the Toronto Blue Jays, who almost had Shohei Ohtani this offseason, but I don't know if they ever really did, but we thought for a good 18 hours maybe. But regardless, they went 89 and 73 in 2023, finished third in the AL East and lost to the Twins in the American League wild card round. They lost Matt Chapman, Brandon Belt, Jordan Hicks, Hyunjin Ryu, and Adam Simber, and they added Justin Turner, Daniel Vogelbach, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, Eduardo Escobar, and Joey Votto, who just hit a home run today, which was really fun.
You did.
Who is your Blue Jays player to watch?
Yeah. So my Blue Jays player to watch. I know, he went on a crazy run last year, and do I think he'll repeat it to the same degree? Absolutely not. But I do think it's worth looking into what Davis Schneider did last year because this lineup needs consistency, and if he can, be an above league average bat, that's all they need from him. Among the 342 hitters that had at least 50 batted balls from August 4th through the end of last season, that's when he made his debut, Davis Schneider ranked 13th in barrel rate with a 17.8% and second in sweet spot rate with a 49.3%. Half of his batted balls were in the sweet spot. He had a chase rate of 15.7%, which ranked third lowest among the 177 hitters with at least 300 outside pitches seen after August 4th, and his 14.9% walk rate ranked 18th among the 289 hitters with at least 100 plate appearances in that span. Davis Schneider pulled 50.7% of his batted balls last season, and 34.2% of his batted balls were pulled line drives and fly balls. That was the second highest rate on that aforementioned list of 342. He also collected 3 outs above average and 2.4 defensive runs above average. So he was a plus defender. And overall, it allowed him to put up a 2.0 F4, the 16th highest among all rookie hitters, despite only playing in 35 games. So Davis Schneider proved to be a guy that, might not have been that fluky, right? I mean, is he going to have a 10.07 OPS? I don't think so. I'd be shocked if he did. But he's a guy that, with some of the underlying metrics, with the barrel rate, sweet spot rate, even if they're not going to stay that high, if they can stay above league average, there's no reason to believe that this guy can't be a 115 to 120 OPS plus hitter with plus defense. That's kind of what they were hoping to get out of Dalton Varsho when they traded him over last season. They didn't quite get it. But maybe David Schneider could beat that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's one thing to get a 1007 OPS by like hitting 500 on ground balls, and it's another thing to do it by hitting barrels, hitting line drives, hitting hard fly balls like Davis Schneider was, and that way is a little bit more sustainable. So yeah, my maybe once or twice a year with these players to watch. I throw in a guy that you may not even see all year, but this is the guy I'm taking the risk on because it's with the Blue Jays and Yankees. I found it particularly hard to find like under the radar guys. I'm sure you did as well, but so I picked a guy who is yet to pitch in the majors, and that is the Blue Jays' number one prospect, and that is Ricky Tiedemann, who is a 21-year-old left-handed pitcher in their system. He was drafted at third in the third round in 2021. He is the highest ranked Blue Jays prospect and is a consensus top 30 MLB prospect. And if I fall here and he doesn't appear in an MLB game, I will blame MLB.com and Fangraphs because they both have him at a 2024 ETA. So they expect him to come up this year. And if I had to predict what his role is, I predict he comes up in like July or August and provides some quality relief innings for them. Because yeah, he has some really cool stuff. In 2 years in the minors so far, he has a 41% strikeout rate. Last year, he had a 44% strikeout rate in fittingly so 44 innings. And in his time in AA and the Eastern League, out of 180 pitchers with 30 plus innings pitched, his strikeout rate ranked second and strikeout minus walk rate ranked seventh. And along with that, I think he allowed like 2 home runs last year in total in the minors. So it's not like that is a problem either. I'm not even hiding that in terms of the underlying
He gave
stuff.
up one.
He gave up 1 home run.
Yeah.
So seventh in strikeout minus walk rate and 1 home run. So I know I don't think they really measure FIP in the minors, but it would be extremely,
I think they
extremely low. Um,
do.
they might. Yeah,
They
maybe
definitely do. I'll check it.
yeah,
You go ahead, I'll check it.
but yeah, the last thing I have on him is stuff wise, MLB.com rates his fastball, changeup, and slider a 60, which is pretty good. It's on a 20 to 80 scale. 60 is very good because yeah, they have high standards with those rankings. Like most most things don't really get above 70. So like having a 60 for 3 pitches is very, very good. Were you able to get that FIP yet?
Yeah, it was a 168.
He had okay, so Ricky Tiedemann had a 168 FIP in the minors last year.
That was
Um,
the lowest of the the lowest of the 1832 pitchers with at least 40 innings pitched at any level combined.
yeah.
The
So
lowest.
that's what we're talking about when we're talking about Ricky Tiedemann. And that's probably why, despite him not really having many innings in the minors and not being drafted high, is why he's a consensus top 30 player in base or top 30 prospect in baseball. So yeah, I would think that, maybe he's not a starter in the big leagues this year, but I could see him getting some quality reliever innings and making a playoff push with the Blue Jays. Yeah, so that does it for players to watch.
Yeah.
What is your
I will counter that and say I think he is a starter this year.
all right?
On Fangraphs, they have Bowen Francis as the number 5 projected starter, who they have starting 5 games and having a 4.36 ERA. Yeah, and I know Ricky Tiedemann pitched in the fall league last year and was like one of the best pitchers in the league. He had a 2.50 ERA in 4 starts with good FIP related numbers as well. Um, I would be shocked if we don't see him in the big leagues this year.
All right, there we go. A stamp
Yeah,
of approval.
yeah, no, I do approve of that pick.
That's good. Good to know. I hope it's not a repeat of Daniel
Right,
Espino
of or Brendan Davis.
or yeah, Brennan Davis, Logan Gilbert in 2020. I was 2 years
Yeah,
early on
I would
him.
say I think every single year you've picked one guy that had never pitched in the like played in the big leagues and they didn't play the entire year.
Yeah,
Or did
yes.
did Daniel Espino play last year at all?
No, well, to be fair to him, he got injured, but
Yeah,
still,
okay.
it's an L.
Yeah,
It's an
every single year you've had at least one pick.
especially in a year where a a, a
Or wait,
Guardians
no, do you
rookie.
have one in okay, well 2021 I don't think you did. Right?
I'm
Because
not sure.
2022 2022 was the Brennan Davis year. 2023 was the Daniel Espino year. This year's the Ricky Tiedemann year.
This year's the Ricky Tiedemann year. But also it was worse with the Guardians because I like there was a Guardians pitcher who finished second in Rookie of the Year voting that I could have
Yeah,
easily
that was
picked.
rough.
And instead I picked
Yeah,
a guy who pitched like 5 innings in the minors and
yeah.
kicked the
Although I
bucket.
think Espino is like a more highly ranked prospect than Bybee was.
He was, yeah.
But Bybee did have interesting numbers. I think I did look at him, but not end up taking,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation before. Um,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I thought his name was Tanner Beebe.
yes. That would make sense as a pitcher.
Yeah, last year was such a bad year for me, and not picking Tanner Bybee when I almost did is a rough one. I don't even remember who I did pick for my Guardians. Oh, I picked Tristan McKenzie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate. He just another guy that just got hurt,
Yes,
but he was
indeed.
my Cy Young pick, so that I thought it made sense.
Yes. So yeah, now on to questions.
Yeah, my question. Kevin Kiermaier has 152 career defensive runs saved, the most of any outfielder in the era in which defensive runs saved has been tracked. Nolan Arenado has 56. Will Kiermaier pass Arenado this season? Arenado has started a lot more games in his career than Kiermaier, and he is fourth all time behind three catchers, or no, excuse me, behind two catchers and Andrelton Simmons.
So basically the question is, will Kevin Kiermaier have 5 more defensive runs saved than Nolan Arenado?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Despite Arenado's drops, I don't think his defensive run save dropped last year. I think he was around 10 last year, if I recall correctly. Or maybe no, or maybe he just had a lot because I know he averaged 10 per year the last 2 years, but maybe he had a lot in 2022. Yeah, I mean, as long as the Blue Jays just keep putting him out there, I feel like he can do it because I mean, he showed despite being in his 30s that he can be, a real key piece of anyone's outfield. Um, it's a good question because yeah, I mean, Arenado's still very good. But yeah, I'll say Kiermaier does it. I
Mhm.
think it's the year of optimist Chris. I think I've been doing a lot of overs, a lot of yeses this year, and
Yeah.
I'll keep it riding. Um,
Yeah.
so my question also revolves around fielding, funnily enough. But according to StatCast, last year, Dalton Varsho and Kevin Kiermaier had 12 fielding run value, and Alejandro Kirk also had 8. This question isn't limited to them, but I imagine it'll be one of them. Who will lead this team in fielding run value in 2024?
Fielding run value. Yeah, so it's definitely between Kiermaier and Varsho. I mean, I don't know. Like, I can't not say Kiermaier. Like, he's just been doing it for so long. Like, Varsho is obviously very good as well. But Kiermaier, like, it's the legacy pick, right? Like, he's gonna be playing center for more of the year. Yeah, you got to go with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
we had Mark Simon on last September, and I think I asked him like, where do we rank Kiermaier all time in terms of defensive center fielders, and how close is he to being behind only like Andrew Jones and Willie Mays?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's up there. I mean the fact that he still is able to play like 130, 140 games a year speaks to his defense because I mean I don't think his offense is necessarily like doing him too many favors unless I'm misremembering his stats from last year, but
Hmm.
still like yeah, it speaks volumes. Yeah, on to the Rays. Yeah, the Rays had a really interesting year last year. They were the hottest team in baseball. They won their first 13 games, I think, and then went 30-9. And they ended up going 99-63, a very good year, finished second in the AL East, but then lost to the Rangers in the American League wild card round. As far as additions and subtractions, they lost Tyler Glasnow, Luke Raley, Robert Stevenson, Manuel Margot, Jalen Beeks, Christian Bethencourt, Josh Fleming, and Andrew Kittredge. And they added Ryan Pepiot, Ahmed Rosario, Phil Maton, Jose Caballero, and Richie Palacios. And once again, like I did with the Yankees, I will talk about the final addition that I just mentioned, who, yeah, Richie Palacios. I was kind of interested in the data that he provided last year in a short sample size. He had 102 plate appearances with the Cardinals last year, and he slugged 516 with an 823 OPS and 120 OPS plus. Uh, Along with slugging 516, he had an 11% strikeout rate and only a 15% whiff rate, which are both elite, especially over a longer sample size, which I know he didn't have, but if he's able to sustain that to some level, he'll be in that elite category. Part of why he slugged 516 was his ability to pull fly balls. 13% of his batted balls were pulled fly balls, which was almost double league average. And 44% of his fly balls were pulled, which is 17 percentage points above league average. And part of the reason why, as I mentioned, he slugged over 500 in 102 plate appearances. Who's your Rays player to watch?
Yeah, my Rays player to watch is another one of those additions. It's not Richie Palacios, but um, it is a guy that they got in the Tyler Glasnow trade. It is Ryan Pepio. I've been interested in him since he came up in 2022 when I wrote an article for the NECBL about him, of course. Um, but in 42 innings pitched last year, Ryan Pepio struck out 38 batters and walked only five. His 7.6 K to walk ratio ranked fifth among the 410 pitchers with at least 40 innings pitched. He put up an 86.7%, or excuse me, 86.7 mile per hour opponent's average exit velo, a 32.1% chase rate, a 3.1% walk rate, and a 27.4% hard hit rate. He had a 29.2% fly ball rate, but 39.4% of his fly balls went to the opposite field, and the average exit velo on those fly balls was only 92.5 miles an hour, which is not that crazy, especially when most of them are going to the opposite field. Um, he averaged 6.9 feet of extension on his four seam fastball, which gave him another mile per hour fully in perceived velocity. His four seamer had an average exit velo, or an average launch angle, excuse me, of 26 degrees last year. And his changeup had an average exit velocity against of 81.8 miles per hour in 48 batted balls and 65 plate appearances. That exit velo ranked 15th lowest among the 146 pitchers with at least 50 plate appearances ending on changeups. So Ryan Pepio, in a few starts last year, had good strikeout to walk numbers. He had weak contact against him. He didn't walk anybody. Had decentish strikeout rates, like I mentioned, and gets a lot of extension. So I'm excited to see what the Rays can do with him. I'm sure they can make him a lot better than he already is. And I'm gonna be honest. I've taken a lot of risks with this series over the years. So, right, like taking Jorge Barrosa this year as the 14th ranked prospect is pretty crazy, but taking a Rays starting pitcher, I mean, how do you top that?
Yeah, you're living on the edge there. I mean, like
Yeah,
it'll look good around May, but when once that 60-day IL stint comes around, it might be tough. That's last year is when I learned never to take a Ray as a Cy Young pick because I did
hmm
say Shane McClanahan and it looked good for like 3 months and then yeah, the elbow went out
yeah.
as it seems to do. Um now now on to questions
hmm
regarding the Rays. Oh yeah, that I
Oh
forgot I
God,
forgot my question. It made me laugh as I read it. Will the Rays have over or under 1.5 pitchers reach 125 innings this year?
125. That is, seems like a tall task.
I believe they had
Well,
one last year.
yeah, and it was Zach Eflin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, so Zach Eflin, he's done it before. He could do it again. They do have Aaron Savali this year, who I'm sure they're hoping to use for a full season. They have Pepio, like I mentioned earlier. Um, their depth chart is not loading for me because my computer's frozen. Um, I'll
Yeah,
I'll take the over. Taj Bradley's hurt
Yeah, I was about to say
already.
he's injured.
Yeah, I know that. Um, there it is. Yeah, I'm going to take the over, right? I mean, I think the midseason edition of Aaron Zavali definitely helps that cause. He's not a guy that's going to blow you away necessarily, so he is theoretically less prone to any long-term elbow or shoulder or arm injuries, whatever it may be. Um, I still don't love that they gave up on Kyle Manzardo that easily just for Aaron Savali, but in terms of innings, like I think he can get it. He can give it to him.
Yeah,
My question, which is more so Zach Eflin, I think was like 13th in pitcher F4 last year among qualifiers. He had a very sneaky good season. Another former player to watch of mine from I think 2022 with the Phillies. Which is more likely? Zach Eflin gets a Cy Young vote shares, meaning he gets votes in any place, or Junior Caminero gets a first place Rookie of the Year vote. Like
yeah,
just a first place vote, not wins it, just gets a first place vote.
a first place vote. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because Junior
Uh,
Caminero has the, I believe, highest raw power of anyone on either Fangraphs or Baseball America. He has 80 grade raw power on Fangraphs, and I'm pretty sure he has it on Baseball America as well.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
He and yeah, he's the number MLB.com's fourth ranked prospect in baseball. And yeah, I mean, people are obviously going to point out the competition with Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, and Jackson Holliday, among others. And yeah, with Eflin, I think there's incentive to just say that someone will vote for him. Um, we'll get Cy Young share, but I mean, Caminero is ranked fourth for a reason. The Rays also have a tough time with keeping guys healthy, and Eflin isn't necessarily known for his health. Uh, and I'm not sure if him underperforming his expected numbers is going to be a trend. I'll go with I'll still go with Eflin. I think the
okay.
standard is I think the standard
Yeah.
is just a little bit lower for him. But
Hmm.
with Common like I won't be surprised, but I just know like especially with Rookie of the Year, it's usually pretty concrete like who wins it. Like I think there's been a couple years now where there's been a unanimous win. I mean, it was unanimous with both guys this past year, right?
Yeah.
Um so yeah, and especially like if Langford and Carter and Holiday all run into good years, it might be tough for Common to get a good one. But you know, that's that's why they play the games. Now on to the Baltimore Orioles, who won the division last year
It did.
by everyone's surprise. They went 101 and 61, won the American League East, but lost to the Rangers in the ALDS. They lost Aaron Hicks, Kyle Gibson, Adam Frazier, DL Hall, Jack Flaherty, Shintaro Fujinami, Austin Voth, and Jorge Lopez, but they added Corbin Burns, most notably, along with Craig Kimbrell, Julio Teheran, and Colton Wong. Who is your Orioles player to watch?
Yeah, this might be a bit of a cheap pick because I try to avoid, top of the line prospects that are not that far removed from it. But I think it's worth mentioning what Grayson Rodriguez did last year and what he could bring into this year. After coming back from the majors, after being sent down, and he came back in mid-July, pitched 13 games, had a 2.58 ERA and a 2.76 FIP. Among the 56 qualifying pitchers from July 17th on, which is when he came back, he ranked fifth in ERA, fourth in FIP, and tied with Spencer Strider for seventh in F4. And again, that's Spencer Strider, who is like the king of strikeout to walk numbers as a starter in FIP based WAR. And yeah, that's Grayson Rodriguez tied with him for half the season. His average exit velocity went from 91.9 miles per hour before the span to 88.5 miles per hour in this span. His barrel rate also went from 12.7% before the span to just 3.9% in the span. His ground ball rate went from 37.3% to 53.1%, and his fly ball rate went from 26.9% to 21.3%. So the major changes that made in terms of results, softer contact, weaker contact, and a better batted ball distribution. And throughout this span, opponents hit 158 and slugged 224 with similar expected metrics against his slider, changeup, curveball, and cutter. So Grayson Rodriguez, he was the top pitching prospect in the league coming into last year, and he did struggle early on, but I think his overall numbers don't necessarily reflect how good he was. Very quietly for the end of the season. And with Corbin Burns being at the top of that rotation, I think it puts a lot less pressure on him, gives him a veteran presence to learn from. And I feel like if he takes another step forward, which I think he's more than capable of, we could see a huge two-headed monster at the top of that Baltimore rotation, maybe a three-headed if Kyle Bradish comes back from his injury.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where like people will look at uh people will look at a 4.35 ERA and be like, ah, he wasn't that great last year, but like thinking about how he ended and how he can carry that into this year, like it does make that top of the rotation a little bit scarier for sure. And yeah, talking about the Orioles and their prospects, like yeah, my player to watch is one of these former prospects, but he wasn't like with the Orioles, with how many guys they have, not everyone is going to get the deserved recognition because like you kind of get lost in the shuffle. But if he was coming up in the Angels organization, he'd be, the talk of the town. But because he's in the Orioles organization, like people people aren't really batting an eye. But Jordan West, I found Jordan Westburg a bit interesting in the time that he played last year. He was a top 100 prospect last year, and he put up a flat 100 OPS plus in 228 plate appearances, and shows the capacity to do much better. As obviously he was a top 100 prospect, even top 75 by I think two of the websites. His average exit velocity was 90.2 miles per hour, which was 1.7 miles per hour above league average. His sweet spot rate was 38%, which is 4 percentage points above league average, and his line drive rate was 29%, which is 5 percentage points above league average. Out of 343 hitters with 150 plus batted balls, his line drive rate ranked 21st, which was top 7%. And he also had a 19% hard hit line drive rate, which ranked 10th out of 343. And he also had an 88th percentile sprint speed. And with when I'm talking about guys strictly based off of their contact or like exit velocity and line drive rate numbers, typically they have like a pretty bad strikeout rate, but he was able to kind of keep it, not horrible. It was below 25% last year. So it's not like we're dealing with a guy striking out 30% of the time here. He's a guy that shows the capacity to be a very productive hitter. So yeah, and tack that on with the sprint speed, he can also outperform his expected numbers a little bit too. Now on to questions for the Orioles.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say this question's really stupid. There's no real statistical way of measuring it, but I think it's interesting, and it was like a random shower thought I had. Do you know who the top prospect in the 2025 MLB draft is according to Baseball America?
The top prospect in the 2025, so it's not even this year.
Hmm.
No, I do not. I cannot say that.
It is Ethan Holiday, who is related to Jackson Holiday. It's the younger brother of Jackson, of course, the other son of Matt Holiday. So my question is, will Jackson Holiday be so good that he starts a Tank for Ethan campaign among the cellar dweller teams?
Will Jackson Holiday be so good that he makes other teams want to perform bad so that they can get his brother?
Yeah.
Precise. That's a precise evaluation of the question.
Yep.
Um,
I said this question's stupid, but I had that thought and I was like, I got to share this on the pod. Because
dude,
the problem with this question is that tanking doesn't really exist anymore because of the draft lottery. But that just means there's chances for more teams, and thus it
yeah,
becomes more competitive.
dude, the Guardians getting the one pick just blows my
Yeah,
mind.
it's I think about the Cardinals, like they had their worst season in 30 years, and a team that almost made the playoffs in their division got the two pick.
Um, well, I'm gonna say it is hard to measure it, but I'll say no, and I'm sure there will be some tweets, but I don't think it's gonna um I don't think it'll hit like trending of 15,000 or
Yeah.
more tweets. I'll say
That's
that.
fair. Like I think of back in 2020 when like Kumar Rocker threw like a 17 strikeout like no hitter in the College World Series, and throughout the entire summer of 2020, every bad team was like, "All right, you know what? Let's just have a bad 60 games and get this guy." And I'm trying to think like, imagine Jackson Holiday is so good that everyone looks at Ethan Holiday in 2025 is like, "Well, he's got to be just as good. We got to get him."
Yeah.
It's worth the hope, finishing 70 and 92 and just praying that the lottery goes our way.
I will say that there's no way to statistically evaluate memes, and
No.
maybe I'm underestimating the power of the meme.
Yeah. It would be very fun. If the Red Sox are bad, I might and Jackson Holiday's good enough, I might start it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. I'll try to stay out of the
Like,
conflict of interest.
it'll create a storyline of, they're playing in the same division,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it would be good for the sport. It'd be good for the sport. Yeah.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah,
It'll be I've heard people say that like baseball needs their version of the Kelseys. I mean, there it is right there.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, like just a couple number one overall picks.
Hmm.
Just really, really getting the league excited. And now on to my question, the final question of the 2024 divisional breakdowns out of 60. Uh, so yeah, Adley Rutschman was second in Rookie of the Year in 2022. Gunnar Henderson won it last year. Will there it be a third consecutive season in which an Oriole is top two in Rookie of the Year voting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Immediately my mind went to like, how does this competition compare to years past? The best one is probably 2022, right? Like Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt Jr. both coming up the same year as Adley Rutschman. Uh, if Rutschman
Stephen
didn't get
Kwan.
hurt, if Rutschman, yeah, Stephen Kwan was good that year. If Rutschman didn't get hurt preseason, he probably could have won it. Last year, I mean, Gunnar Henderson won it. He won it unanimously. Who even else was up for it?
Bybee, Cassis,
Yeah,
I forget
yeah,
who else.
no, no. So I mean, this is definitely uh the second best, or maybe the best competition that he's come into in a season. I'll give it second best just because Witt and Julio were like, you could have, there was not really a consensus top 100 prospect or top prospect that year, but Jackson Holiday is the consensus top prospect. But he's competing with Carter Langford. I mean, like Jackson Holiday has risen through the minors very quickly as a high schooler. Like he's the fact that he's possibly going to make the opening day roster a year and a half after being drafted at like age 18 is pretty crazy. Uh, I'll go with it. I'll say he finishes top two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Things are looking pretty good.
Hmm.
So yeah, that does it for divisional breakdowns. Fun,
It
fun,
does.
fun. That really means we are close to the beginning of the season here. I mean, it starts
Hmm.
as of the release of this podcast, it technically starts in 2 days in Seoul, Korea, but um
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'm trying to pay attention to my sleep. I'll just be recording that. I'll watch it later
I
today.
I I I mean, I have work in the morning, so I
Yeah.
will be set. I will be setting us. I will be waking up at first pitch,
Yeah.
most likely, is
I
what
might
I'm
be
thinking.
I might be going to bed at first pitch. Who knows? I have a day sleep schedule.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
regarding regarding uh this podcast, we have our top 10 players in Major League Baseball. This is not necessarily random because we've been doing a top 50 list over the last 4 weeks. So if you want to check out where we rank guys, go check those episodes out. You know, episodes 295 through 298 is where the rest of the top 50 is, you know, in the later half of the episode. And yeah, you can see where we have certain guys ranked because I'm sure there's guys who would be in some listeners' top tens that are not in our top tens. I think most fans would have Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto in the top 10, but I do not. Um,
Mhm.
and by the way, disclaimer, this is going to be a separate video, but it, for the top 10 list, I'm putting Shohei Ohtani outside the top 10, and I'm sure you're not putting him one because this is a projection for 2024. If he was pitching, he would be number one, I think, pretty clearly for both of us.
Yeah, no,
But
very comfortably.
yes, yes. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to preface this. Who is your number 10
Yeah.
player in baseball for 2024?
Yeah. I mean, I've made it very known that I am in on this guy for 2024. I put him number two in my shortstop rankings, and I'm putting him in the top 10 overall. I am talking about Bobby Witt Jr. We've really only seen him play at an elite level for a couple months, but I'm still buying all in. Not only is Bobby Witt Jr. an elite base runner and an elite fielder. I mean, maybe the best base runner. If anyone's beating him, it's probably only Corbin Carroll. But I mean, last year he was, I believe, top five in F4 among all position players in the last couple of months of last season. And I believe he can continue doing that going into 2024. He had a high expected batting average because he had a 25.9% line drive rate. He had a high expected slugging. Kaufman obviously doesn't help him, but he's hitting the ball a lot harder. He's barreling up the ball a lot more, and he struck out a lot less than he did last year. More specifically in the span, his strikeout rate was able to go down, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, Bobby Witt Jr., to me, I think that what we saw in August and September last year was pretty close to the real deal. I think he's going to continue to do that. And with good defense, with, above average offense, I'm thinking like a 125 to 130 weighted runs created plus, good base running, you're going to see a top 10 F4 among all position players.
Yeah, he's got the whole, or at least has the capability of being the whole package. My number 10 is a guy you just mentioned, Corbin Carroll. He was your number 13, so we're not very far apart on him.
Yeah.
And yeah, just talking about him, like ninth in F4 last year. Didn't play a full season before that, but ninth last year, and he, had the highest BSR in a modern era season. And we do get caught up in the base running and how fast he is and whatnot, but let's also remember, guy had a 134 OPS plus. That's really, really good. The guy outslugged Pete Alonso, Rafael Devers, and Bryce Harper last year while having the highest BSR in a season in the modern era. That's pretty amazing. Also had the first season since 1995 among all players, even non-rookies, with a 130 OPS plus and 12 plus base running runs. So yeah, like his production at the plate paired with his historic base running is something that cannot really be understated. And yeah, he is, based on what he did last year, and like he outperformed his expected metrics, but not by anything more than I would expect him to, considering the fact that he does have that speed where he can, consistently outperform his expected metrics. I expect his numbers to be like fairly similar this year. And he was a top 10 player last year, and I expect him to stay top 10 this year. Do I expect that BSR to be over 15 again? Probably not, but I expect it to be around double digits. And I see that defense I think that defense can improve as well, because he had some like negative defensive numbers. So I could see that going up. Maybe the BSR goes down, but I still see him being top 10. Who is your number 9?
Yeah, my number 9, this is where we get the conclusion on one of our biggest discrepancies on this entire list. It's Mike Trout. You had him at number 33. I put him at number 9. The difference being that you considered the potential for injury, and I did not. I'm willing to set that aside and look at what he did do when he's on the field, and look at what I believe he can do if he stays on the field this year. And is that a thing that I should assume? No, it probably isn't. He hasn't played a full season since 2018. But Mike Trout is still a really, really good hitter. He had his worst offensive season last year with only a 131 OPS plus, but even still, he got a bit unlucky in terms of the expected numbers, and all of the underlying stuff still suggests he can be the elite bat that we've always known him to be. He is still hitting the ball at an average exit velocity around 92 miles an hour. He was actually above his own career average last year, very slightly. He's hitting the ball in the air a lot more than he usually is. He hit a 32% fly ball rate last year, a 43.7% pull rate. The strikeouts were bad last year, but they've always kind of been bad. Like Mike Trout has, for a while, been a high strikeout kind of guy. It's been over 28% in every year since 2021. He led the league in strikeouts the year he unanimously won MVP in 2014. And, when you look at the expected numbers, a 523 X slug to a 490 actual slug, a 275 expected batting average to a 263 actual batting average. Very good chase rate, which means he's walking a lot. He's hitting the ball in the sweet spot a lot, at a 38% sweet spot rate, which is excellent, a 16% barrel rate. And like I mentioned earlier, that average exit velocity. his defense has actually gotten a lot better throughout like in recent years. Like he kind of struggled with it for a couple years, but he put up 4 outs above average in center field last year, so he can still play it defensively. He is still sprint speeding a 96th percentile sprint speed at age 32. Like his speed has not diminished over the years. Yeah, obviously you have to consider the fact that he hasn't stayed on the field in a while, but at the same time, when he's on the field, he is still, I would argue, a top 10 player in the league. And I think if you weren't considering injury, you would put him at least top 20, maybe top 15, top 10. But I think 9 is where I landed on him.
Yeah, if I expected 150 games out of him this year, I think I would put him top 10 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and yeah, it's just a difference in like our line of thinking with these lists. Like I think my line of thinking was, so for example, I put Nimmo 32 and Raleigh 34. So I my line of thinking was I'll take 150 games of Nimmo over 100 games of Trout, which I'm like expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like not every estimation is going to be accurate, but I'm also like I'm taking 100 games of Trout over 135 games of Raleigh. So like that's kind of my line of thinking there. But yeah, I'm as I said in that episode, I'm hoping to be wrong on that one. I hope to see him out there for at least 140 games this year. It would be pretty cool because I'd love to see him stack up some numbers as his career continues to go. My number 9 is a guy who you're not having in this top 10. Which it's there's some stiff competition. What I will say also is my 6 through 12 is all very close, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it'll be more understandable when I get to my 6. But my number 9 is Francisco Lindor, who you had as your number 18. I think part of my thinking here is just the general consistency out of him. He's just kind of always been very good, even in 2021. Like he was still able to put it up around like 4 wins above replacement. But regarding the last 2 years, only Lindor, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman have had 6-win seasons each of the last 2 years. And then combined, Lindor is fourth in FWAR since the start of 2022. And last year, he had the first season since Mookie Betts's 2018 with 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases, and 1.5 DWAR. He had a very sneaky 30-30 season. I get that, stolen bases were a bit easier last year and will be easier going forward considering the rule changes, but a sneaky 30-30 season, got caught only 4 times. That was really impressive. And also, yeah, put up 6 wins above replacement, was well above average defensively, according to both defensive runs saved and outs above average. So, like, that is a Gold Glove capability shortstop who's regularly at least 20% above average at the plate, and also an excellent base runner. Not only steals bases, but doesn't really get caught on the bases either. And with with Lindor, he's one of those guys where you kind of have to use wins above replacement to fully evaluate him because he is so collective in his skills. And I do get maybe not putting him higher because like part of that wins above replacement is just he's been on the field a lot as opposed to some of these other guys. But yeah, like with Lindor, I have to respect what he's been doing over the last 2 years, and based on the underlying stuff, I don't really see it slowing down this year. On to your number 8.
Yeah, my number 8, making his first appearance on either list, in fact, on any list that we have done this off season, it is Yordan Alvarez. Neither of us have talked about him in any capacity throughout this process because we didn't do DHs. We counted him as a DH, although maybe we could have put him on a left field list somewhere. But regardless, we both decided to count him as DHs for this, but I am counting him as the number 8 player in the league. There is a very easy case to make that Jordan is just the best hitter in baseball. I mean, I think it's between him and maybe 1 or 2 others. But when you look at what he's done throughout his career, a 978 career OPS in over 2,000 plate appearances, 390 OBP, a 588 slugging, already 129 home runs. And another guy that has had some slight trouble staying on the field, not to a crazy degree, but he did just miss the qualifier last year at 496 plate appearances. But regardless, he still put up a 990 OPS. And even that felt quite unlucky. He had a 300 expected batting average with a 293 batting average, a 626 expected slugging with a 583 actual slugging. He had a 93.3 mile per hour average exit velocity, continuing to hit the ball incredibly hard. He's not striking out at any high rate. He's not chasing. He's not whiffing at a high rate, particularly at all. He like I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put it into words really because we've never. It's hard to imagine the fact that he's actually kept up his 2019 rookie year over a 5 year, 6 year span. Um, but that's what he's done. Last year, he almost hit more fly balls than he did ground balls, which is always an excellent thing. He's also hitting a lot of fly balls, but not popping up. He has a 31.7% fly ball rate and a 4.1% pop up rate, which is very impressive. Like it's very easy to to mix those up or to have them correlate a lot more, but he doesn't really have that. So Jordan Alvarez is in my number 8 spot.
Yeah, typically hitters with like, higher ground ball rates have lower pop-up rates and higher fly ball rates have higher pop-up rates. But so there's usually like some sacrifice involved with that. But if you're able to get a 30+% fly ball rate and a sub 5% pop-up rate, that is a sign of a guy who knows what he's doing. And Jordan Alvarez seems to be that. My number 8, I maybe I made a mistake here in giving myself more time to get more hype about him, but doing more research, I'm still in that Jose Ramirez hype train. I'm telling you. I have him at number 8 here. Probably higher than most people, obviously, as I've been tooting the Ramirez horn for a few years. But overall, just looking at him on the surface, top 5 in F4 over the last 2 years, and he is the only player in baseball to be top 15 in F4 each of the last 3 years. It's interesting. That's the consistency aspect. Like obviously he hasn't won an MVP in this span. He hasn't been the best
We know
player
he
in
should have in 2020.
in 2020, but that doesn't even include that.
Doesn't even include the span, but we know he should have won one.
He should have won one, but he's never been like in these 3 years, never been the best player in baseball, but he's been consistently top 15, and no one else has been able to do that due to either underperformance or injury. For the most elite players, it's been injury, but nonetheless, and then under the surface, there are various reasons to expect some offensive improvement from Jose Ramirez. He had tied for the highest average exit velocity of his career last year and the highest sweet spot rate of his career, while keeping his strikeout rate in the 98th percentile in all of baseball. And that's despite like his actual results went down, but based on that, I expect those numbers to go back up to what they normally were. He also pulled 37% of his fly balls last year, which was 10 percentage points above league average. And he had 5.2 more expected home runs than actual home runs, which was the second unluckiest difference in baseball. So in saying that, I expect that OPS plus to be back over 140, along with good defense and good base running. He's a good third base defender. He's a very good base runner, steals a lot of bases and gets a lot of extra bases on other guys' hits. And along with that, he's consistently over 130 OPS plus, and I expect that to be over 140 with some of that underlying stuff that I was just talking about, like having 5.2 less expected homers than actual homers, or 5.2 more expected home runs than actual homers is that's pretty astronomical. Some of that was just he hit the top of the wall like 3 times last year.
He
I
did.
expect that to I expect some of those to hover over this time. So I expect his offensive numbers to go up. So yeah, I'm excited once again for the millionth year in a row for Jose Ramirez. But yeah, I have number 8. I'm at the front
No,
of the train once again.
if I put him above you, I would have just canceled the whole segment.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Um, but maybe it would have shown some growth on my side, just like
Yeah.
some less bias. But
Some character development.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
So in my number 7, I probably would have had this guy number 1 in previous years. But I am going with Juan Soto. I've picked him to win MVP every year, I think, since 2020. Uh,
yeah,
hasn't happened yet. Hasn't
yeah,
happened yet, but I think like the change of scenery is going to mean something for him, and I also think the contract here is going to mean something for him. There are obviously things that he has struggled with in the past. He's a man of extremes, if you will, with defense, with sweet spot percentage, stuff like that. Obviously there are things he needs to improve on with the ground ball rate, the defense, maybe the base running. But let's talk about what he does extremely well. Juan Soto, for his entire major league career, including last season, has walked more than he has struck out. And in turn for that, he has also hit the ball incredibly hard. He has been a power hitter. He had a 538 expected slugging last year, which was 95th percentile. He had 99th percentile hard hit rate, 99th percentile chase rate, in a 100th percentile walk rate. And he had a bit of an uptick in strikeouts where it went up to 18.2%, which is still 75th, 74th percentile. We always talk about how, more contact means, or more power means you're sacrificing some contact. And if you are hitting the ball in play a lot, you're sacrificing power. Well, Juan Soto's not really doing that. I mean, he is, at least not from a count perspective. He still hit 35 home runs last year in San Diego, a difficult park to hit in as a hitter, as a power hitter, especially. He stole 12 bases last year, which is a high for a few seasons in terms of his recent years. And I believe that the Yankees will help him improve on the various things. Like the Yankees have been good at keeping their guys from hitting it on the ground. The defense, it's hard to say, but I think there are still some improvements that Juan Soto can make. And I think going into the contract year, he's going to make them, right? I mean, he's got this year to justify why he turned down a $425 million contract, and I think he's going to do it. And for that reason, I put him in my number 7 spot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean he has the capability, no doubt. My number 7 is about another young outfielder. It is what did I say about there? My number 7 is another young outfielder, and that is Julio Rodriguez, old J-Rod out there. He was your number 12.
I would say I'm glad that the 4 guys that I didn't put in my top 10 you have in your 10, 9, 8, 7.
Yeah, that does actually, yeah, that provides some agreeableness. So yeah, with Julio Rodriguez, there was a general drop in offense production on the surface, and I think you mentioned a couple underlying things that also went in the wrong direction. However, I was encouraged by some underlying things that did go in the right direction. His expected numbers improved due to some slight drops in strikeout rate and pop-up rate, and a slight increase in average exit velocity. So I know his OPS plus went from like the high 140s to the high 120s, but I'd expect that to rise back up, maybe not necessarily to 2022 level, but in the 130s or maybe even low 140s. And also away from hitting in total, because J-Rod is a really good hitter, but also what makes him Julio Rodriguez is the fact that he's really good at everything. He had 12 outs above average last year. He had 37 stolen bases, a 57% extra base taken rate, and 7.0 BSR last year. So like he has the whole package, and if he makes those, and if those underlying numbers, spark that offensive improvement that I expect him to be, a number 7 player in baseball. And since the start of May of 2022, his rookie season, he ranks 5th in F4. So I think he's shown that, and I believe he will continue to show that this upcoming year. Only 23. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, he's younger than us. I forgot.
Yep.
So yeah, like he obviously has the ceiling. And we don't even know if we've hit his ceiling yet. But regarding, yeah, who's your number 6?
Yeah, with my number 6, by the way, I went back and forth on my 5 and 6 for so long, and I changed them like 6 times each. But I ended up putting Freddie Freeman in the 6. And it was a tough decision, but that's what I ended up going with for my number 5 mostly. Freddie Freeman has been the model for consistency throughout his entire career, it feels like. I mean, he's He went to the Dodgers in his 30s and has picked right up where he went left off, and in some ways gotten even better. He had a 46% sweet spot rate last year, a 46.6% sweet spot rate in 521 batted balls. Not only is he still playing every day, 730 plate appearances, but he's doing so at an extremely high level, right? I mean, he's kind of the poster child for 300, 400, 500 in terms of a slash line. He's done it for the last 2 seasons now. He did it again last year. Obviously, the defense is fine for first base. I mean, outs above average wise, it's good. Defensive runs above average, it's fine, right? But it is still first base, so it's negative generally speaking. I think that was kind of what put me over the edge to put him at 6, only for F4 purposes. But yeah, Freddie Freeman is among the best hitters in the game. You could probably again make the case that he is the best if you like his style particularly. He is he is every brand of a hitter, right? He hits for contact, he hits for power, he doesn't strike out, he walks a lot, he doesn't chase, he hits the ball hard. He had an average exit velocity out of exactly 90 last year. He barrels the ball up well. He's also a very good base runner, despite not having a lot of speed. He had 86 percentile base running run value last year, a strong fielder at a weak defensive position. And yeah, he is my number 6 player in all of baseball right now.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman. I'll get into him, but I will be talking first about Yordan Alvarez, your number 8. And yeah, this is I think this pick at Yordan Alvarez at number 6 is sort of unlike me. Usually I like, guys with defensive value, guys with good health. With Yordan Alvarez's health, like it is a bit fishy, but the fact that he's played at least 114 games over the last 2 years and produced as much as he has, I'm not really going to hold it against him yet, at least. So I'm begging him on having a full year this year, and even in saying that, like he even when he hasn't had full years, he's been still really productive. I mean, last year he didn't qualify. He doesn't really play defense all that much, and he still managed 4.5 FWAR. That's how good he is at hitting. That's pretty crazy. And that's not even as good as he was in 2022. But with Yordan Alvarez, yeah, I think him and Aaron Judge are kind of, or at least have been in their own tier of hitting over the last 2 seasons. I'm sure there were a couple guys that had really good seasons last year, but as far as, back-to-back seasons, it's been him and Judge. Over the last 2 years, Yordan Alvarez is hitting 300 with a 1,006 OPS. And in the span, out of 105 hitters with 1,000 plus plate appearances, he ranks second in slugging and OPS. And out of 237 hitters with 2,500 plus pitches seen in this span, he ranks second in expected WOBA and expected slugging. All that is just behind one man, Aaron Judge. And although Yordan Alvarez is mostly a DH, he has 96 games in left field over the last 2 years and has a +4 defensive runs saved and only -3 fielding run value. So that's according to StatCast. So he's not really awful when he goes into the field. Part of that has to do with the fact that he has 9 outfield assists in those 96 games, which is a really high rate of outfield assists. And despite him being a DH and missing some games, he ranks 8th in FWAR over the last 2 years, and he has 6.9 FWAR per 650 plate appearances. So that I can't ignore. I mean, I praise defensive value, I praise base running value, but even as a DH, like Yordan doesn't really lack a crazy amount in that. And the fact that he's a guy who has over a 1,000 OPS over the last 2 years, that is extremely, extremely valuable to me. And there's no signs pointing to him not sustaining that, because like his like batting profile is basically like if Juan Soto didn't have a ground ball problem and maybe walked a little bit less. And it's a very good trade-off for Yordan Alvarez. He is him and Judge, in my opinion, are in a tier of their own. But yeah, on to your top 5.
My top 5. At number 5, I put a guy that unfortunately had to miss some time to an injury last year, and man, were we robbed of some potential great games if he played those games. Corey Seager is my number 5, finished runner-up in American League MVP voting last year. Despite only playing 119 games, He still put up over 6 F4 last year, 6.1 to be exact, a 169 weighted runs created plus, and just one of the best offensive seasons, definitely the best offensive season we've seen from him in his career, and one of the best that we saw in baseball. He hits the ball very hard. Another guy that hits a lot of line drives. Another guy that hits a lot of fly balls. Another guy that hits a lot of fly balls but doesn't pop it up. He had a run value per 100 above 1 on every pitch that he's had at least 25 plate appearances and on, of which there were very many. So there is not a single thing you can throw Corey Seager that doesn't work, that you can get him out on as a pitcher, essentially. He also played a solid defense at shortstop last year, a premium defensive position, barreled the ball at a 15.2% clip, which was the highest in a non-2020 season, I should say. So obviously the highest in a full season that he's had. He had a 16% strikeout rate, which is pretty on par with what he's done throughout his career, and 9.1% walk rate, also pretty on par with what he's done throughout his career. Yeah, I mean, he has just been an excellent offensive. He was the face of the ship is gone. This guy is going to benefit from it, and he didn't even really benefit from it that hard because he just lifted the ball more and hit for more power, which was pretty dope that he did that. I think it's cool that he did that actually. And he won his second World Series MVP last year. You know, that's the kind of thing that matters to some people. For me, it mattered enough to put him in my top 5.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mentioned earlier that I think my 6 through 12 is fairly interchangeable. Like, Jordan was my 6 and Shohei Ohtani was my 12, but I could easily see them, an argument for those two being flipped. Or like, even, J-Rod and Ohtani, or Jordan and Corbin Carroll. Like, I could see arguments for one being better than the other. But then I think there's a bit of a gap, and that's where I start with in our second overlap here. Or maybe more, but I think it's just our second overlap here.
Thanks.
Yeah, Corey Seager he's my number 5. Yeah, a really, really good, I mean, unbelievable season last year. Managed a 6-win season, according to wins above replacement, and an MVP runner-up campaign in 119 games. That's very, very hard to do, and that's how good Corey Seager was when he played last year. And I'm not necessarily concerned about the injuries because they didn't seem to be real lingering stuff. I think one of them was like on a foul ball. I don't think it was necessarily like muscle damage or muscle trouble that he had to deal with. So I expect him to play as much or more than he did last year. And he earned every bit of his 1013 OPS and 170 OPS plus, as he was 98th percentile or higher in all expected categories. Also 96th percentile in average exit velocity, 92nd percentile in barrel rate, 86th percentile in sweet spot rate, and 84th percentile in strikeout rate. There was not really any weak point of his offense last year, and that's what leads to having a 1013 OPS. Like, with the sweet spot rate being what it was, that means he was putting it at an optimal launch angle. 84th percentile strikeout rate means he was making contact, and 96th percentile average exit velocity means he was hitting the ball hard. Those are kind of the 3 aspects of offense that you have to include besides, plate discipline, which I think he also had a good amount of last year as well. Maybe not necessarily at a crazy elite level, but it was still pretty good. So yeah, that's my number 5. Also, yeah, the defense is also pretty good at the shortstop position, which says a lot for a guy putting up a 170 OPS plus. Who is your number 4?
Yeah, my number 4 is a guy that has gone through like 17 different positional changes in the last 2 months alone, and it is Mookie Betts. He's playing shortstop now. He was my number 1 second baseman, but guess what? He's not playing that position because they trust him over Gavin Lux to play short, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, look, Mookie is maybe the best athlete in all of baseball, right? I mean, like, we've seen him do everything on the baseball field. We see him bowling. We see him dunking a basketball despite being 5'9". And there's no reason to believe he can't play shortstop as well. That's what we're going to watch him do this year. He was dominant on every aspect of offense last year. His lowest percentile in any offensive metric was 82nd percentile barrel rate, which is hilarious. The defense did take a bit of a step down last year, especially in the outfield. And, we don't know what to expect from him. at playing a full season at the infield for probably the first time, or likely playing a full season in the infield for probably the first time. But regardless, he's still doing his thing on offense. He had his best offensive season maybe since 2018, late last year. Still a solid base runner as well. And I mean, again, yeah, there's not a single thing he doesn't thrive in. He's pulling the ball a lot more. He had a 27.6% ground ball rate last year, which I love, even for a guy with his speed and athleticism. He has the power to hit it out, so he should just hit it in the air as much as possible. Pulling the ball again at a 45% clip, which I like. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to justify like putting other guys above people at this point because everyone is just so good. But Mookie Betts found his way into my 4.
Yeah, 100%. My number 4 is his teammate, Freddie Freeman. Hopefully I have enough time to talk about him. Yeah, Freddie Freeman. He might sort of get, I don't know if you'd say lost in the shuffle here, but like he is, I think sometimes people forget about how good and how valuable his consistency is on a year-to-year basis. He's the only position player to have a 7-win season in 2022 and 2023. He's the only player to slash 300, 400, 500 each of the last 2 years. And then also in the span, he is second among all players in F4. He's second in batting runs and extra base hits, and he's also first in hits, times on base, doubles, total bases, and also away from offense or away from hitting, has 4 outs above average and was 23 for 24 on stolen bases last year. So even as a first baseman, he is very valuable on the bases. And with Freddie Freeman, you can really rely on his consistency because his underlying numbers always show that he deserved to be as good as he was. Over the last 2 years, he leads in batted balls in the sweet spot zone as well as hard hit line drives. Like he is the best at consistently getting hard hit line drives, and that's why he has the most hits over the last 2 years as well. And like he's not just an average guy. He's putting out over 20 home runs, at bare minimum 40 doubles a year. Last year he almost got to 60. Like if you look at his baseball savant page, like it is all red in the expected categories because he just consistently does it. I mean, last year he had a 47% sweet spot rate last year. That just does not happen. And that's while keeping his strikeout rate below 17%. That there's a reason why he's the only guy to have a 300, 400, 500 season each of the last 2 seasons, and the only position player to have a 7-win season each of the last 2 years. Because he also, he does it on the bases as well. So yeah, I'm a Freddie Freeman stan just because he always does it, and he's been getting better with the Dodgers for whatever reason. With their player development lab and everything. So yeah, I'm banking him for top 5 this year. Who is your number 3?
Yeah. Were you getting nervous that I was going to put Shohei number 1 anyway?
No, no.
Okay. Well, I didn't. I put him at number 3. I have Shohei Ohtani in my number 3, despite not pitching this year. Why? Because I think people underestimate how good he is offensively. Offensively alone, Shohei Ohtani, I think to me is still a top 3 player in all of baseball. In the integration era, Shohei Ohtani is one of just 5 hitters to put up a season with 595 plus plate appearances, a 180 OPS plus or higher, and 20 stolen bases. The other 4 to do so were Joe Morgan in 1976, Barry Bonds in 1992, 1993, and 1996, Mookie Betts and Mike Trout in 2018, and then Shohei Ohtani in 2023. So one of 5 hitters in the last 80 years almost to do that. And not to mention, he's also a very good base runner. He's, quick, and he also has excellent expected numbers, a 427 expected WOBA, which is remarkable, a 19.6% barrel rate. Are you kidding me? A 54.2% hard hit rate, a 15.2% walk rate, almost averaging a hard hit ball in terms of average exit velocity, 94.4 miles per hour. And the obvious knock against him is, he's a DH. And him playing DH allows the Dodgers to re-sign a guy like Jason Hayward that gives them a defensive upgrade. So that to me like means a little something. Not I don't weigh it too heavily, but I feel like it's a slight counter to the he's a DH thing. Um, but I think offensively alone, Shohei Ohtani is still a top three uh player in all of baseball. And then obviously you put in the pitching, and he's the obvious number one. That's the obvious take, but offensively alone, I would still take him over most players.
Yeah, he was certainly there last year in terms of offense.
Hmm.
Like, if he didn't pitch a single inning last year, I still think he probably should have won AL MVP no matter if he was pitching or not, considering how dominant he was offensively. And yeah,
Hmm.
we'll see if he can repeat that or get close to it. My number three is also his teammate. It's crazy how crazy how
Yep.
stacked the Dodgers are. But
Say the
this
last like four guys we've talked about have all been Dodgers cumulatively.
yes. Yeah, I'm talking about Mookie Betts, who yeah, like made some strong offensive improvements, and based on the fact that like there was an actual like concrete um thing that made him better, which was having like a full off season at Driveline Baseball, which has been known to just improve overall results of high level players. Um, I think that could be sustainable to a degree. Mookie Betts last year had career highs in average exit velocity, sweet spot rate, and walk rate, and that gave him his best average on base percentage and slugging since his historic 2018 season. He was also the only player in 2023 to have a strikeout rate, sweet spot rate, and average exit velocity in the 85th percentile or higher. That is those are three important but mutually exclusive aspects of hitting. That's the ability to make contact, ability to hit a lot of line drives and optimal fly balls, and the ability to hit the ball hard. And he was 85th percentile or higher in all three of those categories. That's really, really good. And I think that's why his offense is fairly sustainable. Along with that, um, his his defensive value in terms of like outs above average and defensive runs saved, it's been dwindling a little bit. But although his outs above average was below average last year, I think there's definitely value in the fact that they can really move him around the field wherever. Although that's not going to reflect in the outs above average or the defensive runs saved, there is that value to be like, okay, we can fit another guy in the lineup because Mookie can play short today. Whereas for most players in MLB, understandably so, you can't really do that. So he brings that factor that like defensive runs above average or wins above replacement can't really factor in. That like should be noted as much as we like to talk about sabermetrics and whatnot. So yeah, I mean Mookie Betts had his best season since 2018 last year, and um, I could see him getting close to that again this year. Who is your number two?
Yeah, number two, I have the reigning National League MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr. Um, what an unbelievable season he had. The fact that someone can have a career strikeout rate hovering around like 25% and just decide one year, actually, it's going to go down to 11.4% this year, coming off a year and a half removed from a major injury, is just completely wild. I mean, that is an insane thing that he did last year, while also maintaining a good walk rate and also maybe the best batted ball profile in all of baseball. I mean, 100th percentile in X WOBA, X batting average, X slugging, and average exit velocity, while also not striking out, while walking a lot, while not chasing, while not whiffing. It was just an insane thing. And oh, by the way, he also hit 41 home runs and stole 73 bases. If in case you didn't hear about that, that was a pretty cool thing that he did. Um, yeah, I mean, the fact that he had two run value per 100 against four seamers, sinkers, and sliders, despite facing all of them at least 500 times last year, is absurd. That doesn't happen. People don't do that usually. The fact that he hit straight away 40% of the time is pretty cool. Good for the batting average, and he has the power for it to not matter because a lot of his home runs went to deep center, which is just remarkable because that's not exactly something you're supposed to be able to do on that consistent of a basis. But he did it last year. He has power to all fields, which is excellent. Obviously, he has speed. There's nothing that he hasn't really excelled in on the baseball field in his career. Obviously, the outs above average took a dip last year, which that's the root efficiency and stuff. He does make up for it with his arm value and his arm strength, which is good. But I put Ronald Acuna Jr. in my two. Last year felt like, maybe it's the ceiling, but maybe it's something that he is.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, and I'll be talking about Ronald Acuna Jr. more because he's also my number two.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we talked about this with another guy. Yeah, it was Otani actually, who last year had a career high average exit velocity and a career low strikeout rate. And we talked about how like that's very unusual. Like usually that those two don't happen in the same year. But Acuna did that, but to an extreme degree. Like he cut his strikeout rate by I think more than half, and he had his highest average exit velocity by like more than 2 miles per hour. Like it was absolutely nuts. And like it does seem random, but like the fact that he did it over 100 like 59 games, it's like I can't bank on him, not doing this again. So yeah, I mean, obviously a historic season last year, well earned, as you mentioned, 100th percentile in all expected categories and average exit velocity, along with 73 stolen bases, great extra base taken rate as well. Like yeah, I mean that he won MVP last year, and I expect him to be around this level again this year. It seemed like, 2022 was a bit of a fluke, and all his other seasons have been either really good or elite, around MVP level. So, yeah, I'll put him at two because yeah, normally, yeah, last thing I'll say is like normally I do talk about guys on a 2 year scale, but with like Acuna and Seager specifically, like with the years they had last year, I kind of have to ignore 2022. So, those are some guys I'll make exceptions for. Yeah. Who is, yeah,
Now we get to
to
move on to number
the
one.
mysterious number one. Who might it
The
be?
mysterious number one. Yeah. You may remember him from, of course, being number one on his respective positional list. He is the big star of New York, the biggest market in all of sports. He's coming off of an injury-riddled 2023 season. I'm talking about Edwin Diaz, baby. Ring those trumpets, play that song. He is the no. No, obviously my number one is Aaron Judge. Despite the strikeouts, they're still up this year. I don't really care. When you're putting up a 712 expected slugging, that's a joke. That doesn't happen. When you're putting up a 27.5% barrel rate uh, for basically 2 seasons in a row, because he had a 26.5% barrel rate in 2022. Um, I don't know what else needs to be said about Aaron Judge other than he is just a complete freak of nature. He's a 6'7" outfielder that moves very well and is a pretty good defender. I'd say he's like an average defender based on all the metrics right now. Obviously, the toe was a bit of an issue for him last year. But he did just undergo an MRI, and who knows what that's gonna be. But what I do know is Aaron Judge just continues to put up fly ball rates north of 38% or 40%, like he did in the last 2 years, respectively. It doesn't matter where he's hitting the ball, whether he's pulling it or hitting it to the opposite field. One, because he plays in Yankee Stadium, but two, because he averaged 97.6 miles per hour on his average exit velocity last year. With that, you're hitting it out at any part of the ballpark. So, the beautiful thing about Aaron Judge is that obviously he has this kind of freak power because of just his size, but he also distributes it so well. If you look at his three highest fly ball rates in any season, in any full season, it's 2017, 2022, and 2023, which were probably his three best offensive seasons in his career. From 2018 through 21, he had around high 20% fly ball rate, 30.4% in 2020, but that was not a full season. And 2022, it jumped up to 38.3%, 2023, 40.8%. So as long as he keeps doing that, he is going to continue to be the best player in baseball, I assume, or I figure, because he has so much power that as long as you just hit a fly ball as much as you can, that's how you hit 62 home runs. That's how you hit 37 home runs and only 458 plate appearances. By the way, he had a 613 slugging last year and only a 1019 OPS, and it is a miracle that it was that low. Like his expected slugging was 99 points higher, fitting for his number, of course. Like he had so many hard outs last year, line drives that were caught, fly balls cut at the wall. Like it is a miracle that his OPS was only 1019 last year in that limited sample. It does kind of suck that we missed out on another full season because he probably could have made another run at 50 or 60. Um, he was like he hit I think like top five home runs in the AL despite missing like 2 months. That's the kind of guy we're talking about here. That is my number one player in baseball.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah, I'll continue to talk about Aaron Judge as he's clearly my number one as well. And yeah, people may put, Betts and Acuna above him. I get it, because of how great their years were last season. Because yeah, I mean they had historic years on their own, but with Judge, like you got to consider he had an 11 win season in 2022, and he followed it up with like his like moderate follow up was a 1019 OPS, his and a 613 slugging. He was elite, and also you mentioned the strikeout rate and expected slugging. The expected slugging accounts for the strikeout rate. So even though he had a 27% strikeout rate, still expected to slug over 700. That is a crazy accomplishment. That speaks to how far and away he hits the ball better than the rest of the league. So yeah, breaking down Aaron Judge, he leads all players in F4 by 1.9 over the last 2 years, despite missing 56 games last year. But when you're explaining that, that means according to Fangraphs, he is worth two more wins than at least two more wins or around two more wins than every single other player in Major League Baseball over the last 2 years. And that's a cumulative stat. That accounts for the fact that he missed 56 games last year. It's not a rate stat. So that says that even with his injury, he's better than everybody else, and he's produced more than everybody else over the last 2 years. Like talking about him with like Acuna, Betts, even Freeman, like they all had better cumulative years than him last year, but he was right on track with them on a rate basis. If he didn't run into that wall at Dodger Stadium, because that's literally what that injury was him running into a wall, not him, straining an oblique or a hamstring. It was he ran into a wall making a great catch, not getting a lingering injury. If he did not run into that wall, he would have had around the same wins above replacement as Acuna, Betts, and Freeman. But because he ran into that wall, his season isn't going to be recognized, understandably so. But when you're projecting for 2024, like I have to account for that because like he should have probably had a 7.5, 8 win season last year as a moderate follow up to his 11 win season in 2022. So yeah, like I think he'll be probably maybe the best hitter in baseball. Oh yeah, last thing I'll mention is in regards to that injury, he had a 966 OPS and only -1 outs above average after coming off the IL, after that toe injury happened. So, and that was when his injury was worse. I imagine his injury was worse coming off the IL than it is now. So I think that won't be as big of a problem this year. So I expect his OPS to be, at least 1,000 this year, along with pretty, average or above average defense, pretty average or above average base running. So yeah, I think he'll and I think 1,000 might be the floor for him. So yeah, based on what we know about him. So yeah, Aaron Judge number one, and he'll have to be dethroned in
Yeah.
order for him to be
Or
taken off that. Well, he'll be
Shohei Ohtani just has to pitch again.
he'll have to be dethroned as the best position player in baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Shohei
just looked
is
up.
is superior.
I just looked up his expected slugging on contact. Do you want to take a guess from
Is
last
it
year?
is it like 1150,
It's 1104.
1104?
Yeah.
Crazy.
The next highest was Shohei at 896.
Yeah. Yeah.
Minimum 1,000 pitches seen.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean,
Um,
obviously Shohei when he comes back for pitching and if he doesn't fall off completely offensively, he will be number one next year. So
mhm.
I predict we will both have him number one for 2025.
Yeah,
But yeah,
assuming he does the thing on offense again. Yeah.
for this year, it's Judge numero uno.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, that does it for that does it for the AR top 50. It's been a pleasure.
We should
The
recap our top tens again.
Yes, indeed. We want to go first?
All right, my number 10 is Bobby Witt Jr. My number 9 is Mike Trout. My number 8 is Jordan Alvarez. My number 7 is Juan Soto. My number 6 is Freddie Freeman. My number 5 is Corey Seager. My number 4 is number 3 is Shohei Ohtani. My number 2 is Ronald Acuna Jr. And my number 1 is Aaron Judge.
Yep, my number 10, Corbin Carroll. Number 9, Francisco Lindor. Number 8, Jose Ramirez. Number 7, Julio Rodriguez. Number 6, Jordan Alvarez. Number 5, Corey Seager. Number 4, Freddie Freeman. Number 3, Mookie Betts. Number 2, Ronald Acuna Jr. And number 1, Aaron Judge.
We
So
had
yeah,
4 overlaps on this entire list, and they were 1, 2, 5, and 30.
shout out Luis Robert.
Shout out to Luis Robert for being the 30th best player. No denying that.
Yeah, this was a fun one, and yeah,
Mhm.
I'll be interested to see how these lists look, and I'm waiting on that foolish 50.
I know. I've never anticipated it more than usual. Yeah, we always talk about like, oh, we'll actually revisit this time, and then we just don't. I actually think we should revisit our top 50s
Yes, because
at the end of the season.
these are like, I think these can be determined more concretely, because like when some of these questions that we ask each other for the teams, they can be a bit silly sometimes.
What do you mean? Like if Jackson Holiday is so good that they started campaign to tank for his brother?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Um, and I feel like stand-ins we always reference throughout the season, so we never really dedicate a
Mhm.
segment, but we do kind of acknowledge them throughout the year. So yeah, top 50 we'll have to do. Awards we always kind of typically like reflect on if it's a stupid pick or like if it looks good for us, like when you correctly pick Sandy Alcantara. Talk about that a little bit, uh but yeah, like yeah, I'll be excited to see, especially with our
That's right. I did do
discrepancies.
that.
Like will
I
Jose
forgot. I
Altuve
almost
be closer to 13 or 38? Who
Mhm.
knows?
2022 was such a good year for me in predictions. I nailed that. Like
Um,
I nailed my NL Cy Young pick. My AL Cy Young pick got second. Stephen Kwan was my number one hit that year. Like that
and then
was so good.
the year before you correctly predicted the Braves winning the World Series.
That's true. And the year before that, I correctly predicted the World Series matchup.
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
fell off hard last year.
Yeah, well, 2023 was a crazy year for everybody.
Yeah,
I think we say that about every year.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
just you
it's
got
not the main year that people say it about in recent memory, but
yeah, I kind of said that facetiously because
yeah,
I feel like every like New Year's it's like, ah, man, that was a crazy, and I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was kind of normal.
it was another year.
It was just another
Yeah,
year.
I guess we did graduate college. That was pretty crazy.
That's true,
You
but that
got
was
you you
expected.
got you got your first job. I got a big time internship.
What would have been
Um,
an event is if I graduated in 2022 or 2024. That would have been not expected, because like throughout my life it's kind of been
you graduated
expected.
on time.
Yeah,
No
like
way.
throughout my life it's been expected I graduate college in 2023. I think it would have been crazier if this year I'm walking the walking the stage. That would be pretty rough.
Yeah,
Um then I could talk about some years being crazy. Um
yeah.
but uh but yeah, that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio here. Exciting one, top 10 players in baseball, but I think next episode will be a bit more exciting because we have the uh, the
Season
second
preview.
the second edition of the I haven't heard that name in years draft.
Oh yeah, that too.
And then we have season predictions after that. So
Yeah.
it'll be we'll have a midweek bonus. I think it'll come out either Wednesday or Thursday, Friday at the latest, I'll
Hmm.
say. And then predictions should come out probably next Monday or so. So yeah, looking forward to that. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Check out the playlist, including guest interviews, most recently with Stephen Schock of D1Baseball.com. Also, check out all of our positional rankings, along with the top 50. We have all the positional rankings in one playlist. Go make sure to check that out. Also, follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter, @Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show on Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all of the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we'll be joined by some guests for the second edition of the I Haven't Heard That Name in Years draft. We will see you then.
This conversation is over.